It was around 7:45 by the time he arrived at the hall, and though the loud music and noise boomed from within, there were still plenty of people still arriving. Yang stood behind the front counter, smiling and greeting each person as they arrived. Somehow her dress had always surprised him, since to look at her, one wouldn't have thought it fit. It was pure white and seemed almost innocent, with a modest mid-thigh length and no cleavage to speak of. For such a brazen, well-developed girl, it seemed almost timid. Ruby's dress was more advantageous, and that was Ruby of all people. That was just how she could be. A bundle of contradictions in her own right. People who saw her as only a brain-dead blonde soon found themselves in trouble. He smiled when her eyes caught his. She didn't smile back. "Where have you been?" she hissed when he reached the front. Her friendly expression was still present, but it was clear it was for the benefit of everyone else, for her eyes were locked onto his and flashed crimson. "You're late. Do you have any idea how embarrassed Weiss was?" Embarrassed? Why would she have been embarrassed? "Isn't she here already?" he asked. "She said she was coming at 7:30. "You remembered that but still came late?" Yang growled, and it looked like she might tug at her hair for a moment, before she stamped something on the paper in front of her and waved him in. "For crying out loud, get in there. Gods. If I'd known you'd do this, I would have had Blake escort you at gunpoint." What's up with her? Jaune wondered as he stepped past his teammate and into the hall. Flashing lights and loud music was the first thing to greet him, and it took a few seconds for his eyes to adjust to it all. It was the same music it always was. Events could change, and who lived or died wasn't set in stone. But it seemed that lacking any direct interference, the musical talent of the kingdom would spew out the same songs each and every repeat. He listened to them with only half an ear. He looked about the hall to try and find her, making sure to check the small nooks and crannies where someone who didn't want to be seen might hide. "There you are," he thought as he finally found her. Cinder laughed to some joke from an older student, a glass in one hand and her body angled in a manner to best show off her tempting form. She played the game well. The poor fool had no idea what he was doing, but would be turned away somehow thinking he got the best deal out of it all. Then, when attention was taken away from her, she would slip away and into the night. She had to make an appearance at the dance first, to create an effective alibi. No doubt that was why she conversed with the people around it all. If she wanted to remain apart from them, she could have just had Mercury act as her date. It was just a case of waiting long enough for her to make her move, then stepping in. All there was to do was wait and keep watch. There was a muffled shout from the dance floor, and he saw Cinder look that way. It was just Ren and Nora, with the former dragging her date out amongst the other couples and start to fling him about. Jaune snorted at it, but kept his attention on Cinder's reaction. She laughed and said something to the student. It was something from the 3rd year. He recognized the face only so far as to know he wasn't involved in her plans in any way. Cinder's facial expression said as much, for she looked too pleasant and too sweet by far. He picked up a glass of punch from a nearby table and pretended to drink at it as he slinked about the edge of the hall. All he needed to do was... "Jaune!" The voice came from the left and he bit down on a frustrated growl as the awkward clip, clop, exclamation of shock from nearby heralded Ruby's stumbling arrival even before she staggered over to lean against the pillar beside him. I really don't know how anyone walks in these." "Practice," he said distractedly, eyes still on Cinder as she crossed the dance floor to whisper something to Emerald. "Aren't you going to dance with anyone?" "Me?" Ruby giggled. "I danced with Pyrrha earlier, and Ren asked me to come and save him a dance once Nora's done hurling him across the floor. Then again, I think his exact wording was, 'Save me,' and not, 'Save me a dance.' But it'd be the same thing." "Right," he said, not really listening. Emerald hovered close to Cinder, and he watched as she feigned a reason to talk to her team leader, distracting the other guy as Cinder slipped away. Was she going to make her move now? Jaune made sure to follow, but Ruby caught his sleeve. What? He snapped. Ruby's eyes widened. Oh, I just... She looked away, eyes downcast. Sorry. Am I bothering you? Jaune instantly felt like the worst scum. She didn't know she was distracting him and didn't deserve his temper. I'm sorry, Ruby, he said, eyes still on Cinder. I didn't mean to snap, Ruby. Please forgive me. What is it you wanted to ask? Yeah, it's fine. Ruby laughed. It wasn't, and he could tell. She was still a little startled. I was just wondering, weren't you going to come with Weiss? That comment pulled his eyes away from his quarry, if only for a second. Really? Was everyone going to think that? We're partners, Ruby, he explained. That doesn't necessarily make us a couple. Or is there something you want to tell me about you and Pyrrha? I won't judge, and if I did, it'd be at least an 8 out of 10. Ruby's face went from red and she slapped a hand against his side. She was innocent, but not so innocent that she didn't understand exactly what he suggested. He smiled at it, but quickly flicked back to watch Cinder. She moved over to talk with Mercury now, and without really thinking about it, he moved to get a better angle. She would make eye contact with each of them before making a move. She was cautious like that. She wouldn't want to move without ensuring her lackeys know exactly what their roles were. Ruby stubbornly staggered behind to try and keep up. Wait, she called and bumped into someone. Sorry, Jaune, wait. What about Weiss? That name made him pause, if only for a second. Weiss? What about her? Aren't you going to dance with her? I can do that later, he said. I doubt she'd want me to bother her now, though. But she looks so lonely. Those words cut through the haze of cinder-induced fog that clouded his vision. His attention snapped away from the criminal and back to Ruby. The younger girl's face was filled with sympathy, but he didn't have time for it. What do you mean lonely? Doesn't she have a date with her? Instead of answering, Ruby pointed towards a distant corner of the hall. Weiss stood there, by a buffet table with a glass in one hand. She always wore a simple dress at a dance, one that actually seemed no more expensive or impressive than Yang's. Or rather, she normally did. This time she wore a beautiful dress in purest white, a full ball gown that shimmered and glittered down to her heels. Her hair had been expertly done up in a neat bun with strands that fell across her face, and she wore a silver pendant about her neck. He would admit, that surprised him more than he thought it would. Why the sudden change? She's never put that much effort into the dance before. What's different? Is it because the winter is here? She looked incredible. She always did, but now she held a mature air that seemed to make her look older, more refined, but still as untouchable beauty as ever. Any man would have been proud to count themselves worthy to stand in her presence. Yet none did. And that fact seemed to crush her. Jaune's teeth ground together as cold fury burned through him. For fuck's sake! He growled under his breath. Cinder forgotten. What happened to her date? He asked, already half knowing the answer. Goddamn Neptune and his stupid inability to dance. He warned the idiot about that. He warned him what would happen if he upset Weiss. Hold my glass. He pushed it into Ruby's hands and left before she could even speak. En route to the balcony, Yang met him, eyes wide and cheeks flushed as she panted. There you are, she gasped. What the hell are you doing? Weiss is... I know, he growled and pushed past her. I'm already working on it. But she's the other way. He heard her shout something more and follow him, but his attention was already focused on that shock of bright blue hair he could see on the balcony outside. Even Yang's constant attempts to make him stop went unheeded. He had to stop Cinder. He had to do what he could to protect his team. But if Neptune couldn't even be trusted to do this one thing, maybe he didn't deserve Weiss after all. Neptune didn't see him coming. Perhaps he could have avoided having his back slammed against the balcony if he had. Jaune doubted it, however. He would have hunted the man down to Mistral and back if he had to. "Whoa!" Neptune cried, eyes wide with alarm. Jaune? I didn't do anything, man. What are you doing?" The brat was afraid. Good. He had enough problems to deal with thanks to Cinder without Neptune's pathetic insecurities dragging his partner down. "What am I doing?" he said, far more calmly than he felt. "Is giving a little rat a second chance he doesn't deserve." "What?" Jaune felt Yang's hands on his arms and heard some frantic babbling, but he cut it off with a growl. He pulled Neptune in close to his face. "Didn't I warn you if you asked Weiss to the dance? You'd best show her a good time?" Yes?" Neptune stammered. "And didn't I also warn you that if she looked upset, I'll tear it out of your goddamn hide?" The boy nodded, but was unable to say anything as Jaune's gloved hands tightened on the fabric of his shirt. "She's too good for you by far, but I still encouraged you since I thought you'd give her the respect she deserves. Now I find you cowering outside like some kind of rodent, while she looks miserable and alone. I'll give you 2 words to explain why you abandoned your date." Jaune threatened, eyes narrowed into slits. "If I don't like them, well, off the balcony you go." "I didn't." Neptune's eyes were clenched shut, as though he expected a fist at any moment. Jaune paused, however. "Didn't what?" he asked. I didn't abandon my date," he stammered. I didn't even come with a date." Doubt crept into his arms, which suddenly felt the full weight of the man he was holding in the air. He let the student fall, though his fist still gripped his shirt. "You said you would ask Weiss." I did," Neptune agreed, one eye cracked open. "But she said no. She turned me down, man." "That wasn't possible." "Why?" Jaune asked, more to himself than the frightened teen. "Why would she?" She said she already had someone she was going with. She said she was sorry, but she wanted to go with them and wanted to wait for them to ask." "What?" "She did." Jaune's face crossed as he tried to piece together who that might have been and why he hadn't known. "Who?" he asked, eyes focused on Neptune's. His, however, were aimed over Jaune's shoulder and had grown very wide. Roar. The furious roar came from his right, and Jaune gasped as his arms were wrenched away from his victim. His back slammed into stone, this time the wall on the other side of the glass windows which led to the balcony. He fought for breath as he looked down into Crimson Eyes. "You idiot!" Yang seethed. "You absolute bastard!" "What? Weiss didn't come here with him." Yang shouted directly into his face, her own twisted into a rectus of fury. "She turned him down. She turned him down because she thought someone else was taking her." He tried to speak, but she cut him off by pulling back and then slamming him into the wall again. His back protested, even as the breath was blown from his lungs. "Who?" he gasped. One head latched onto her wrist as he struggled to break free. The look Yang shot him was filled with rage. "You!" she hissed into his face. "She waited for you. She waited outside the hall for over 30 minutes, while people watched and smirked to see her without a date. She waited and you never came." Jaune's heart froze. "What?" he gasped. "Weiss? Snee?" Yang pronounced slowly. "Waited. For you, Jaune Arc." She led him slowly down from the wall and backed away. He didn't follow, however, and remained against it, too shocked to move. "What are you going to do about this?" "Do?" but she can't. He hadn't done anything different, and even if he had, Weiss never showed any kind of interest in him. It wasn't just that he couldn't believe it, but it just didn't happen. It was like saying Cinder could be redeemed, or Ruby might suddenly murder innocent people. It didn't happen. How? He shook his head. Denial mixed with pain, and something else burned away inside him. I don't understand. The look Yang gave him might have been pity, had not her sympathy died long ago. Instead, it was as though she looked on a ruined man who had no one to blame but himself. How? She repeated with a bitter laugh. Maybe because of you. Maybe because of how you act, what you say, and how you treat her. But I haven't done anything different. Different? She sighed. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but whatever you've done, it was enough to mean something to Weiss. You treat her like a normal person. You laugh and joke. You make her smile. Hell, you flirt with one another all the time. That's just a joke, he protested. That's your stupid husband and wife joke. It never meant anything. Did you ever think that it might have meant something to her? He fell back. No. It just couldn't. It wasn't possible. Was it? No, of course not. He tried. He tried so many times, and Weiss never cared or wanted anything like that with him. I repeat, with Weiss. It was like trying to explain to Ozpin about time travel, an idea given up long ago because it never worked out. I think she was interested a while back, Yang said, though I doubt even she fully realized it. But how you saved her the other day, and the words you said, that whole jumping into an inferno for someone you love thing? Is it so hard to believe she might have developed feelings for you? No one develops feelings that fast. You're not listening, she shouted into the silence. It wasn't the start, you idiot. It was the catalyst. The thing that made you think it might be possible. That you wanted something more. Hell. You even up and told her not to worry because she would have a date to the dance. What did you imagine she would think you meant? I was going to ask Neptune. She didn't want Neptune, Yang snapped. He asked her before and he tried again by the sounds of it. But Weiss isn't going to accept someone she isn't interested in. She thought it meant you were going with her. We all did. His words. He wrecked his mind to remember them, but the way he said it and how she reacted. On hindsight, and with the benefit of Yang's words, it seemed so damned obvious, but at the time, no. He'd seen it that time too, but just refused to accept it. When something was impossible, it ceased to become a possibility. Weiss was one such impossibility he'd come to accept as such, come to rely on as such. Except that now, something heavy built up in his throat and it felt like he might choke. Horror and nausea welled up within him, more so when he thought back on her expression. The way she dressed up, how she had smiled at him earlier and looked so excited. That would be a secret. She sounded so carefree and happy, like she never had before. It hadn't been Neptune to end that either, and the realization was enough to make him feel sick to his stomach. He slumped back against the wall, one hand coming up to his lips as he struggled to stand. For a moment, he thought he might collapse. You didn't even notice, Yang whispered in a voice equal parts disbelief and awe. She looked him up and down, his state, his reaction, and seemed to understand at last. You actually didn't notice? I can't believe this. You can get into any girl's pants, but the moment one develops feelings for you, you don't notice. Because it never happened before. Because he wasn't a playboy or a Casanova. He was a guy. He was a guy who knew from experience what each woman wanted and how to get their attention. He didn't know how to flirt and seduce women. He just knew how to repeat a given set of words and actions. Things he learned over 100 years. There was no charisma, no ability or technique. Just a good memory and a lot of practice from reading a goddamn script. This was new. Impossibly new. And all the more frightening for the fact it was someone he cared for. What if he did something wrong? What if he hurt her feelings? "You say it like it's so obvious," he growled. "You act like anyone could have seen." It was. It wasn't Yang this time, but Neptune who spoke. The man clenched one hand to his collar but looked no worse for wear. "Dude, I thought it was obvious and I don't even know you. Weiss." She looked embarrassed to turn me down, but really excited for her own dance. She was nice about it, but I could tell she had someone else on her mind. "Blake and I knew for a while," Yang added, "but I think even Team Ruben noticed as well. Hell, Weiss's sister certainly noticed, and she's as good as got you a matching outfit to take Weiss with. What did you think that was for?" "I thought it was to suggest they owned me," he muttered. "I thought it was a joke. God, how blind can one guy be?" Was he blind? Had he let his past experiences prevent him from seeing what was before him? Weiss's misery said so, and he bit down on his lip. Damn it. "Well, it's not too late to fix it." Yang sighed. "I'm not sure you even deserve it. But Weiss looks like she's waiting for you still. I asked her to dance, just to try and cheer her up, and she said she wanted to wait." She gave him a pointed look he neither missed nor needed. He knew what she was waiting for. Him. But it wasn't as easy as Yang seemed to think it was. He looked back to the hall, and to where Weiss was, but also where Cinder lurked. If he went to spend the rest of the night with Weiss, Cinder would attack the CCT and install the virus that would turn all the paladins against their masters. It would result in the deaths of hundreds of people, civilian and hunters alike. If he went with Cinder, then Weiss would hear and see. She would be devastated. The entire team would fall apart, pick sides and tear itself to pieces. He could go back and save Weiss from her misery, or he could save untold lives, and ultimately, Weiss too. But not both. Why were there never any easy choices in life? Why was it this had to weigh so heavily? Music thummed behind them, the beats reaching his ears over the ruckus sound of dancing, and yet it sounded dull and muted. His own heartbeat pounded in his ears, drowning it out. It felt like he could hear each desperate pump of blood the tortured organs sent around his body. Yang watched from nearby, but made no move to intervene. It was as clear as day she wanted to, and yet she understood not to interrupt his mental process, as jumbled as that was. When had Weiss? Sure. Looking back, there were occasions where they were close, where they laughed or talked to one another. It might have been considered flirting by some, but she always seemed to know the difference. It never felt like that. I'm not wrong here. Weiss never showed any feelings like this. This is all too sudden. In the end, it didn't matter, did it? How and when Weiss had decided she felt this way made no difference in the fact she was upset and alone now, nor did his lack of understanding on when it happened. All that mattered was that a decision had to be made. Cinder or Weiss. The immediate choice shouldn't have been so binary, and yet in a way it was. He knew that if he stopped the CCT, Cinder would find another way around it. Nothing would be halted by his going off to stop her. He could go to Weiss and keep her happy, then interfere with his nemesis another way. But it wasn't quite that simple. If he chose Weiss now, if he prioritized his team's happiness over what he knew would happen in the future. Then it was the first step on doing that for every occasion. If he couldn't bear to choose Judy over Weiss's happiness, then what happened when he needed to choose all the people of Vale over Yang losing an arm? What happened if he had to take a chance to save 1,000 lives, but had to leave Blake to face Adam alone? How could he be expected to do those things if the sight of Weiss upset was enough to make him drop arms? It would be the first step on that path, onto a path of abandoning everyone else in favor of the people he loved. It would start with Weiss, but where would it end? In the grand scheme of things, Weiss could survive a little rejection and pain. Others would not be so fortunate. And yet he couldn't. His eyes clenched shut and his head pounded inside his skull. There was something wrong, something visceral not right about the idea of leaving Weiss behind like this. It was Pyrrha all over again. Except that he'd learned to avoid Pyrrha's feelings for him. He learned to manipulate her so she would never fall for Jaune and never had to suffer for it. It didn't ever occur to him to do the same for her. Weiss was a safe option, a reliable security net. He didn't need to act differently around her because she wouldn't develop feelings. Yang's patience didn't last as long as it ought to have. "What's so difficult about this?" she asked. "You're acting like this is the end of the world." He ignored her. She didn't understand. Plans flashed into his mind, discarded moments later when they failed to take everything into account. Was there some way to do both? To comfort Weiss and sabotage Cinder? Should he do both if there was? One was a distraction, the other a necessity. But she was his friend too. She was special. "I know it's a shock," she went on. "Well, it shouldn't be, but apparently it is for you. But still, it's not like you're new to this or anything." His teeth ground together and he took several deep breaths. He felt dizzy, like the world swayed left and right before him and he might fall over at any point. One hand latched onto the wall beside him. He felt sick. "Jaune, you can't just stand there. What about Weiss's feelings?" Something snapped. His eyes zeroed in on her. "And did you," he seethed, "ever consider my feelings?" He took a selfish pleasure in the way Yang's eyes widened and she stepped back. His anger spiked and he pushed off the wall to step towards her. "Did you consider that this might not be easy for me? Did you consider that I might not feel the same?" She hadn't. That much was clear. Yang's face fell in an instant. Skin drained of all color as she realized the cruel truth and what it meant. Her eyes flickered from him to the dance floor, and she seemed to pale even further. "Of course you didn't." Jaune spat and pushed away from her. She caught herself on the balcony, but it didn't stop him tearing into her. "You just assumed, like you always do, like everything would work out. And once more, I'm backed into a corner and someone's gotta get hurt no matter what I do. Again." He added with a meaningful look that made her pale further. But I thought..." "You thought what?" He scoffed. "You thought just because I sleep around, I'll be fine to hop into Weiss's bed as well? I'm not going to fuck Weiss, Yang." He spat out the word like some kind of slur, and in a way it was. He didn't want to do that to his friends. Not anymore. Weiss was more than a shag to complete a full set. Or was it that you thought I had feelings for her too? Just because I stepped in front of an attack for her? If memory serves, I did that for you and Blake too. Are you going to force me to pit someone else's feelings against my own again? Or is that something only you get to do?" "No, Yang shook her head wildly. "It's not like that. I didn't make this happen. I didn't do this. Weiss is the one who felt this way. She thought you were taking her because of what you said, not me. I'm just a messenger." She was right and he knew it. But he was far too gone to listen to such logic. Everything was a mess in his head. A jumble of plans, plots, and contingencies that fell apart the moment he touched them. What had he done when Pyrrha did this? He dressed as a woman if he recalled. What had been the point of that? Why had he even done it? That wouldn't make Weiss feel better, nor would it solve the cinder problem. His head pounded, but when he felt cool fingers touch his cheeks, he recoiled. "Stay still," Yang whispered, and he felt her pinch his nose between her fingers. His eyes widened to see her with cloth in hand, his nostrils held between it. When she pulled away, the white cloth was stained red. He touched his nose and saw her fingertips come away with spots of blood on them. "Calm down. Don't lose control." "This," Yang began softly. "This is really serious for you, isn't it?" "Shouldn't it be?" he asked, snatching the cloth from her and using it to stem the rest of the flow. "No, it should. I mean, it's Weiss's feelings. No, Weiss's and yours. She looked away inside. "I guess I assumed too. Maybe I fell for your words like Weiss did. You act so differently to her than you do anyone else. You act like you're a married couple. And you say I act like your father too." He grunted. "It doesn't make it true." "No, it doesn't." Neptune hovered nearby, silent as the grave and clearly unsure if he should speak or run. "About Weiss," Yang said. "Could you... how you feel for her? Is it really not..." She shook her head. "What I'm trying to say is, are you sure it wouldn't work out? You can always try. What's the harm?" "The harm?" He wanted to laugh but felt too drained for such a display, and she didn't deserve it either. To anyone else, the chance to try a relationship out was a part of growing up. It didn't have to mean anything. But then again, most teenagers hadn't lost their last few hundred lovers, had they? How many had been forced to watch the people they loved die over and over again? How many had cradled not one, not two, but countless women as they died in their arms? Or rather, it was the same woman, but they continued to die. Over and over and over again. Or worse, having to see them again and realize that the woman you loved and died for had forgotten you. To realize they were strangers once more and that everything they'd built together was gone. I can't do that anymore. I just can't. He couldn't handle it. "No," he rasped, voice thick with emotion. "No, I can't. Weiss is better off with someone else." Even if she didn't realize it, even if she didn't want it, he would make the choice for her. "I'm sorry, Yang," he added as a last to her. "But it's not going to work out." The blonde-haired girl looked disappointed. Oh, she hid it well behind a calm expression, and no doubt that was to try and save his feelings. But he knew how to read her better than she did herself. Clearly, she'd known about Weiss's fledgling feelings for a while, since it seemed she really had hoped they would get together. "I really am sorry, Yang." "If that's how you feel, then that's how you feel," she whispered. "It's just... Weiss has to be told." "I know. It was only fair, and the sooner the better, since to delay would mean hurting her feelings even further. To think back when this started, this was what I dreamed of, wasn't it? How time changed a person." "I could tell her for you," Yang said. If anything, I'm partly to blame for putting this on you. It would be an easy option, wouldn't it? To let Yang deal with the situation, the hurt, the feelings, and the distress. He could avoid the problem altogether and stop Cinder. It would just mean doing his partner a disservice. No, Yang, I'll do it. He said, Weiss deserves to hear it from me. Besides, if you want to talk about blame, I'm pretty sure this is my fault too. I'm the one who stupidly dropped hints about dates and never realized she thought it was me. Yang tried to smile. It was weak and brittle. Go easy on her. She begged. Don't worry, I will. I promise. There was still time after all. He could talk to Weiss until he saw Cinder make her move, at which point, he would have to as well. He staggered away from the wall, away from Yang, and away from a man who he'd wrongly threatened. None of them tore away at his insides as much as the person who awaited him inside, however. Why did everything have to be so complicated?